Hi, I'm Amy Porter, and this is my podcast. My mission in over 100 episodes is to show people how to empower themselves through music, business, and media. I try to see as clearly as possible how I can help. I showcase the music that I've played and the people I've met along the way. I'm a wife and a stepmom and a gamma. You might know me as a professor, performer, a producer, a publisher, a recording artist, and now an author. And I'm the founder of a couple of nonprofits. Welcome in to my Porterflute Pod. Welcome to Porterflute Pod. It's season 9, episode 1. Today we're diving into the world of asset protection with a company that truly understands the rhythm and the vibe of its clients. Joining us is Jack Schoenfeld from Clarion Insurance, the undisputed global leader in specialized insurance for musicians, recording studios, and instrument dealers. For over 50 years, Clarion has been the trusted safety net for everything from setting up students with new instrument accounts to clients with multi-million-dollar rare acoustic instruments and equipment. Unlike standard rigid policies that leave gaps in coverage, Clarion crafts elite, all-risk, worldwide protection that covers everything from accidental drops on tour to the actual depreciated value of a repaired masterpiece. So whether you're an independent creator like me or managing a world-class studio or a large ensemble, Clarion will ensure your musical passion is never silenced by the unexpected. Let's welcome Jack Schoenfeld from Clarion Insurance to the podcast. Jack Schoenfeld from Clarion, welcome to Porterflute Pod.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you because I'm an instrumentalist. I think nothing about insuring my instrument until the policy comes due every year. And probably I would need you when something went wrong.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And, of course, insurance is not something that you want to think about on a daily basis. Hopefully, the only interaction that you have to have is once a year. But knowing that we're here for you, that's the important part about insurance.
Exactly. I'm so happy to welcome Alan J. Tomasetti, also who's co-producing this. He's formed the questions into 5 segments for us. So we're going to get going. But before we begin, there has to be the absolute question. Do you play the flute?
I do not play the flute. I was a saxophone player, so there was some interaction, but I never played a flute.
Well, there's some similar fingerings between the sax and the flute.
There are. I know that there are some people who transition back and forth, but I never got as far to try.
Okay. Well, I'll know now that you know what I'm talking about. And that makes me feel so good. Because if you only were an insurance person and had no idea what I did, it'd be a little different.
Yeah. No, we definitely have to have semblance of both, right? We have to understand the insurance industry, which can be very tough. It's very businessy. It's very financial. But you also have to be a creative to be able to work with musicians and understand what they're going through and what their instruments mean to them.
Well, I'll get started with why insurance matters. And we're going to start talking about the value of our instruments. Common misconceptions are my homeowner's insurance covers it. Well, I know better than that because you could have an extra policy on that homeowner's, but it doesn't automatically cover your flute. Now, another common misconception, nothing will happen to my instrument, not even in 24 hours. And then the last thing, instrument insurance is too expensive. So can you speak to those kind of common misconceptions?
I think you nailed them all because those are probably the 3 most common things that we have. So with homeowners, it's definitely a valid option if you have a very low value instrument that you never play outside of the home or play professionally. But usually where homeowners lacks is it's a personal policy. So if you're playing professionally, that's just outside of the scope of what a personal policy usually does. Also, you just have to remember that you're working with a company that their claims coming through are for somebody's pipe breaking in their house and it damages a wall, or you smashed your car. when you come across a flute that's made of gold, they look at it and say, oh, is it worth $500? And you're sitting there knowing that it's worth a lot more than that. So it's partially the coverage, but it's partially just working with a company that totally understands the instruments that you're working with and deals with instruments all day. So that's where homeowners usually compares. And usually you have to buy an extra policy, like you said, on top of your homeowners anyway. So we'll get into that with the cost. Now, with the cost, I mean, typically a lot of people think that it's expensive, but it's a lot less expensive than people think. Sometimes it's very comparable to homeowners. Sometimes it's slightly more. But again, if that's allowing you to go out and gig, and if that's allowing you to go and travel the world with your instrument, the few dollars a year or month are not going to be a big enough factor for it. Lastly, you spoke on, oh, nothing's going to happen to my instrument. When somebody says that to us, we chuckle a little bit because every single claim starts with, oh my God, I never thought this would ever happen. Because the truth is that if you see a claim coming, it's not shocking, and insurance would kind of not exist, right? If everybody saw the things that would happen to them. The truth is that every claim that comes through is something that somebody would have said, oh, I could have pictured the 5 things that would have happened, that I fell down the stairs, or that a fire happened to my home, but I didn't expect that, my dog would trip me and I would fall into my instrument. So definitely have seen very, very crazy claims.
Yeah, 30 years, not 20. And
30.
I was playing a concert, a recital at university, and I played Lo Lieberman's piece that's for piccolo, bass flute, alto flute, and flute. And I wanted to use them all. So I did. And afterwards, I put the piccolo on top of the whole stack. I went out and played the rest of my show. And backstage, I came back, and the piccolo, in its case, was gone. And the girl who was watching my things was gone. There was no one in the hallway. There was no one around the school. I was saying, how could this happen? So I have to tell you, the only time my wallet was stolen, everybody, was backstage. It's only happened twice. But backstage, you need to keep that stuff like in the apron, basically, of the hall, within the backstage area. Don't leave it in the green room. Don't leave it in your dressing room. Take your flute, your purse with you. So I would like to know, what claims do you see most often, and what claims surprised you the most?
Definitely the most common claim is some sort of accidental damage. And usually, I would say a good portion of them, maybe the majority, happen on stage or at a gig. That is kind of surprising because everybody's shocked. They're like, oh, I left the instrument with a friend. Or, this happens all the time. I was simply just putting down one instrument and picking up the other, and I knock something down, or a stand hits it, or, if it's a wooden instrument, something falls on top of it. So that happens all the time. More things happen inside the home than people think. I mean, we have so many things that happen with pets, with children, distracting parents, and then all of a sudden something breaks, falling down the stairs, falling up the stairs. I forgot to latch my case. I mean, these sorts of things are things that you don't expect to ever miss or make an error on, but happen every single day.
One thing that surprises students is that they also need insurance because they're at risk, right? They bang into each other in middle school or high school, and they say, Professor Porter, there's a big dent in my head joint. Well, that claim could be taken if your parents took out some insurance.
Yeah, we insure a lot of college students, and usually that comes up because once a student is leaving the home and now living in a dorm, that again kind of goes beyond homeowners insurance. So that's when they start to think about it. But if you have a student who's going to school for music, right? Or even they're in high school and they're very serious about music, and you purchased your first serious instrument for them, not a student instrument anymore. Now they're playing on a professional instrument or somewhere in between. I mean, that's something that you absolutely have to consider insuring, because the values, I mean, you have to be with somebody who understands that there is a 17-year-old kid playing on a $30,000 instrument and what can happen to it.
So prevention and preparation are just as important as the coverage. I learned to keep my instruments close to me and to keep my eyes on them or someone I trust with them at all times. And that could have prevented the theft of my piccolo. And then preparing is to have Clarion in my life. So even as a college student.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's as simple as just doing the regular maintenance to your instruments so that, you're not having to transport it to repair shops more often than not just because you didn't do proper maintenance or, fluctuation in temperature. All of those sorts of things are important to just keep your instrument up to date so that you don't have to have an insurance claim.
Well, speaking of temperature fluctuations, let's talk about now traveling and
Yes.
touring and performance risks. So, what should we know before we fly? And does coverage change because we're traveling internationally? And lastly, should we keep some documentation on us that this is indeed our instrument and it's insured? Before you answer, I'll give you my little flute flying tip. When you're in the cabin of the plane, do not put that flute above your head and put it under your seat. However, when during landing and takeoff, when all the flight attendants are seated, you're going to reach down and you're going to either pull that flute up into your lap or put your feet under the bag or whatever you can do to brace the impact, takeoff and landing of that plane, because I have had the flute hit. The pilot did the best they could, but they hit the ground a little too hard in Seattle, and I ended up in an instrument repair shop with the foot joint out of whack. Not in the Wiseman case, I should say, but that was in the old days of the French flute case. So things have gotten better for us. So that's kind of my travel tip. What tips do you have for flying with our instruments?
Yes. So, you're a great spokesperson to this. I love how much care you take to, put your feet underneath the bag, really try to brace the impact. And I hope that everybody does that. Thankfully, flutes particularly, you are mostly able to take them onto a plane. It's not a larger instrument where they start to say, oh, we need to gate check that. Although there are some larger flutes, probably the worst thing that you could do is check an instrument into luggage. That is almost guaranteed damage. But of course, when you're flying, take the best precautions that you can to keep control of your instrument, whether that's in your bag underneath the seat instead of the overhead bin, but certainly try not to check it. In terms of the coverage, what we offer at Clarion, and most specialized policies would, it's worldwide coverage. So that's the best part of it. It's worldwide and it's professional use. So you can go and travel the world and play as many gigs as possible. And there's no restrictions on territories. That being said, if you are a gigging musician, it's very important that as soon as you buy an instrument or have any changes to your instrument schedule, to start a policy or to amend your policy at that time. Because a lot of musicians wait until the day before they have to fly or ship an instrument. And then when they call up the insurance company and, oh, we're closed for the day, or, oh, underwriting has an additional question, you can't purchase it on the spot. Now you are stuck in a situation where you can't get your instrument insured. So the best time to insure your instrument is when nothing is going on. At least then throughout the year, you know that you can hop on any plane. You know that you can go to any territory. You know that you could play as many gigs as possible, and you never have to think about insurance. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who contact us from the airport and say, I need to get insurance. And we say, it just doesn't work like that. It's not something that you could just buy in 5 seconds. We need to get proper documentation, get proper information. So please do it when the time is not needed, so that when you do need it, you never have to think about it.
What does musical instrument insurance actually cover? Because I know it doesn't cover theft from your car.
So that's actually not true.
Really? Have you amended it?
We don't have an exclusion for that, but how our sort of policy works, which is different from other policies, is we have what's called an open peril or an all risk policy. So what that means is that everything is covered except for anything specifically excluded on the policy. So there are exclusions, but there aren't a lot of them. They're usually things like governmental action or like nuclear warfare, things like that. Of course, wear and tear and maintenance are not covered, right? So if the instrument's just over time it degrades, or if you're just getting a tune-up on your instrument, those things aren't covered. It's more for like actual direct physical loss. But there aren't any exclusions for theft out of a car. Of course, we hope that you don't leave it in a car overnight, and that's not a case. But there aren't any exclusions for it. It's very few, and very few claims get denied because the policy is fairly open for the needs of musicians specifically.
Jack, that's so helpful because we're always taking the flute in the car and then going to a restaurant or popping into a store. And I always say, hey, everybody, you got to take your flute with you because insurance might not cover that car. But that's good to know that Clarion will.
Yes, there's no exclusion on it, and there are very few exclusions. Of course, somebody should read through the policy. This is not full me laying out all of the wording out on the podcast here, but it is designed specifically for musicians.
Also, to clarify, we do things called a clean oil and adjust, and our insurance doesn't cover that, right? It's just for total damage, right?
Yeah, so it's designed for accidental, direct physical loss. So there usually has to be an event that happens. So maintenance is something that you should be doing. If you think of it like a car, right? Car insurance is for when you get into a fender bender, not for, I'm getting an oil change on my car. That's kind of the difference.
Exactly. Well put. Okay, so how often should we get our instruments appraised? Because you need that appraisal paperwork in order to get the insurance going.
Yes. So certainly there is a threshold that underneath we don't need any sort of documentation. But, with the rising prices of flutes, especially because the ones that are made of, specific metals, they're going up. Usually we recommend about every 3 years. However, it really has to do more with how often the price is changing on the instrument. So if you're insuring your instrument and it's appraised for $30,000, now if for 5 years the prices are still around $30,000, you may want to get appraisal, but it might not be directly needed. However, if every single year your instrument's going from 30 to 35 to 40 to 50,000, then getting appraisals more often are definitely a good idea.
So keep all this on file in one folder. You're going to need it, and you're going to need it in a paper file. So yeah, be a little bit redundant in this area, right?
Yeah, and certainly, most flutes are going in for service once a year, maintenance. So that's a great time to talk to the shop that's doing it. Hey, can you look at my flute? Is there anything, value-wise? Should I be updating my appraisal? Can you do it while it's there instead of me having to take a separate trip out or ship the flute again? That's a great time to have that conversation with your dealer or your repairer.
Such a timely conversation as well. It was my flute repair company that said, Amy, you're going to want to call your insurance company this year because your flute has just gone up $20,000. Now, I have to say, I adore Clarion because they're the only insurance company that'll call you up and say, guess what? We're going to offer you a lower price. And that's what happened to me. I was paying a certain amount, and then I don't know if it was you or someone else, and they said, you've been with us a long time. You have these instruments. I think we can do better for you. Wow, who does that?
Yeah, and part of that is because we are a privately owned company. The issue with a lot of smaller insurance companies is that they're getting acquired by larger, just corporate insurance companies. So when that happens, and these companies are running massive amounts of business, they kind of just do blanket to everybody. Oh, we're raising everybody's rate this year. Whereas with Clarion, we are able to underwrite each policy individually. And if we see somebody who is not paying the correct premium, or you've had a major change in your policy, we're able to be nimble and say, okay, no, this needs to be changed, and not just have to put a blanket rule on everybody.
Thank you. That's incredible. I love that aspect of Clarion. So here at Porterflute Pod, we're going to give you some practical tips. You're going to print out that policy, keep it in paper form, and create yourself an instrument inventory. You're also going to photograph your equipment. All your equipment needs a photo because if it's stolen, you can access that information easily and just show it. And also keep the serial numbers accessible to you. I've memorized my flute serial number.
That's impressive. That's impressive.
Well, you have to.
Yeah, I what the tips that you're giving are absolutely true because the truth is that we hope that nothing ever happens to your instruments, but if something does, when the claims adjuster reaches out, the more information that you have to prove where an instrument was last or what the last condition of it was or, you know, some distinguishing features, you know, if there's an engraving or there's a serial number. Having all of that information is just easier because it might help them, you know, give more information to the police if the instrument is stolen or really understand the condition of it before and after so that you can prove exactly what happened.
I know we touched on it a little bit in the opening, but if you could touch on that again, what advice do you give parents?
Yes. So if you're purchasing the first valuable instrument for your child, that's the time to get the instrument insurance because there's a relationship that you build with the insurance company. So, you know, Amy, you've told me that you've been with us for 30 years, right? We're able to look back and say, okay, well, we have 30 years worth of data on Amy, and she's obviously been a fantastic customer, right? There's that relationship that you could start from an early time rather than wait until, you know, they're 30 years old and then lose that history. Also, this policy is evergreen. So it's not just, oh, I purchased this flute and at some point when they purchase another flute, oh, we cancel one policy, get the other. How our policy works is at any time you can add more instruments, you can remove instruments, you can change instruments. So let's say you put that first one on. Now, when you purchase a separate head joint, you could put it on there, a case, rather. You could put that on the same policy and then you sell the first flute. You just add on the next one, right? The policy actually continues even if the instruments get changed over time.
I feel like the human is more insured than the instrument at this point. I love you just have one human person who owns some instruments and then doesn't own some instruments, and you can add on to that one policy instead of changing it all over again, which is what has to happen for everything else in life.
Yeah, it's the opposite of transactional. We're really looking at you, and we understand that musicians, it's common practice to buy and sell instruments, or, you know, hopefully for most people, just acquire over their lifetime.
Let's move on to school-owned instruments. Do I need insurance for a school-owned instrument? Because I know personally, University of Michigan doesn't insure our instruments. We loan them out, they come back. We have an instrument repair fund. But what happens if what do we do for the stolen piccolo, for instance, from Michigan if it gets stolen?
So there's two separate things here. There's we do insure institutions, right? So if Michigan has 100 instruments that they want to insure, we will create a policy for that. But this actually brings up a broader topic of, on the student side, or really any professional musician, what happens if you are borrowing an instrument or renting an instrument from somebody, which is, again, an even greater reason to have a policy already established. Because let's say you're a student, when you purchase your instrument, you start an insurance policy. If you take a loan or borrow an instrument from the university is going to require you to insure that, because really the insurance is on the person, because it's how they're storing it, how they're using it, where they're traveling to. The underwriting is done on the person. So when the university says, hey, you want to take this instrument, you have to insure it, you have a Clarion policy there that you can simply just add it on and remove it when you're done with that, which is very helpful. And an enhancement that we have to our policy, which is pretty rare for others, is we allow you to borrow an instrument for free up to a certain amount for 30 days. So if you're borrowing an instrument that's either under 50,000 or under the greatest value that you have in your policy, that could be 30 days free of coverage.
Okay. Now, I lent out my alto flute this fall to the Ann Arbor Symphony flutist, who I trusted implicitly, but I did say a prayer. And it came back beautifully. If something had happened to that alto flute, was I covered even though I lent it?
It would be covered under your policy. We do say that if it's going to be a longer term loan, if they're going to have it for a year or even a few months, it's always best that they put it onto their insurance policy, because where you don't want to be in a situation of is if somebody else made a mistake and they damaged it, it will reflect on your policy, and now you'll have a claim on your policy. Versus if they had their own, they insured it under theirs for, let's say, 3 months while they borrowed it. If there was a claim, at least their policy would react to it and you wouldn't be penalized for having a claim. That is probably the most correct way to do it. But yes, if it's a short-term loan, technically your policy would be able to react to that and cover it.
Okay, that's such a great detail.
Yeah, it's really, it's one of those things that there are multiple ways to do it, but as a musician, you want to protect yourself as best as possible. Just like if you loan your car to somebody else and they crash it, you would rather them take the hit for having that claim because it was really their responsibility rather than your insurance go up for it. And auto insurance works differently, but that's the general concept.
Okay, that's so great. All right, some quick fire questions from Alan. What's the most common claim?
Most common claim is just accidental damage of somebody out gigging or at home and just accidentally placing, dropping, something like that. Absolutely every single time. They don't expect it happening.
And it's all the claims we don't hear about because we hear about the major thefts from train stations in Europe or damages from airplane
Yes.
companies. So we hear about the tragedies, but we don't hear about the random. You know what happened to my student? She put her instrument in her arms along with the keys, her purse, and everything, right? She got in her car and somebody was waving at her. And she rolled down the window and they said, "Your flute, it's over here on the curb." What happened? And she didn't know. It fell out of her hands. Another car came by, ran it over, and it flipped over into the yard. I don't even want to say those words. It was so horrible. But only the foot joint was damaged, and I think the head joint was, irreparable. So my student lost her instrument completely. Powell said, "No, we can't replace it. You're going to have to buy a new one." But these things, these things happen and you don't even know it.
That's unfortunately how it does happen. Most people think that the most risky thing is shipping it or flying with it, which those are risky, but you don't want to wait until you're doing those things because the truth is that most of it just happens on the in-between, right? I put my instrument by in my car and I accidentally ran over it. I mean, that happens.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest insurance myth?
Biggest insurance myth is that you can purchase insurance when you need it. We kind of touched on it before, but I would say that a lot of people are shocked when they call and say, "I need a policy set up right now." We can do it quickly, but if you're sitting in the airport and there's documentation needed or anything else, you might run into underwriting restrictions of, we can't write the policy right now. So that's probably the biggest myth is don't wait until you absolutely need the insurance to get it because insurance is a market and sometimes things go up, sometimes things go down, and sometimes things are unavailable.
So think about it, everybody. Make time to think about it. We started the podcast off by talking about how we never think about this stuff. Okay, so what's one thing every musician should do today about their instrument insurance? And I guess that's kind of an easy question. Renew it if you haven't renewed, or get some if you don't have any. But is there anything else that's not obvious?
It's always good, at least once a year to look at your instrument schedule and say, am I insuring everything? Right? Because sometimes people have claims and there's multiple instruments lost and they're like, "Oh my God, I never put on this instrument." Right. And I didn't realize that I wasn't insuring it. So definitely check it once a year, not only for instruments that may be missing, instruments that you might have sold that you're still paying premium for, or just generally all the values to make sure that you're insuring everything for the fullest amount that you need.
I know you have insured a contra bass flute, but is there another unusual instrument you've insured?
Oh my God, we see every type of instrument. We see singing bowls, we see lutes, we see a bunch of antique instruments, we see Stradivarius violins. Yesterday, somebody called in with an auto harp, and I was like, wow, she said, "What type of instrument does this fall into?" And I was like, wow, it's just very unique. because it's not quite any instrument. We had a discussion over it because it can kind of fit into a couple different categories.
So what did you settle on?
We actually put it as, because anything that doesn't kind of directly fit into one, we have like an other instrument category, and that's what we ended up classifying it as.
Here you go. Other parentheses auto harp.
Yeah, then we put in the description of what it is, because sometimes there are instruments that we insure, but just there's not enough of them to have its own category for it. So then they're just looked at individually.
Many flutists go out on tour, and we have a suitcase full of instruments. What's the best advice for musicians heading out on tour?
Heading out on tour, I think you nailed it, is just always keep your instrument in your sight or with somebody that you highly trust, right? Don't just assume that somebody that you've never met is going to protect your instruments, or somebody who's supposed to be tasked with handling your instruments is going to do as great of a job as you are. It's just always keep an eye on it. There's definitely a greater chance of something happening in somebody else's hands versus yours.
Excellent advice. Excellent. So if somebody remembers one thing from today's conversation, I think it would have a trickle down effect, right? So you remember insure my instrument, and then they call you, and then they have to do all the other things. Is that right? Just insure your instrument. That would be the one takeaway, I think.
Absolutely. It's like you said, it's preventative. You don't wait to do the maintenance on your instrument until it's too late. So don't wait to purchase insurance until that claim happens, and then you have to learn from it and only purchase it after. Keep track of your documents, make sure that you're speaking to your repair person about what your instrument is worth. And if you have any questions, insurance companies aren't scared to tell you exactly how the policy works. So just ask.
Do you have other resources online where we can learn more about instrument insurance and how to contact you?
Absolutely. Go to our website, clarionins.com. We have information on there on our coverage. Also, you can contact us through there. You can get a quote through there. That's the best way.
I'd like to thank Alan J. Tomasetti for forming all these great questions. We all believe that protecting an instrument means protecting years of your artistry and your education and a personal investment. So thank you, Jack Schoenfeld, for being here in Porterflute Pod. Our listeners appreciate this greatly. I'm thinking that you might pick up a few flute players in your insurance company this week.
Yeah, and we're happy to speak to anybody, regardless of if you need a policy or not, just to educate you. And thank you to you and your team for putting this together and allowing me to be here.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for being in Porterflute Pod.
You as well. Thank you.
Clarion Insurance is the largest privately owned insurance agency in the U.S. dedicated specifically to the needs of musicians, recording studios, and the broader music industry. Based in Hauppauge, New York, Clarion has been a leading specialized insurance provider for over 40 years, insuring everything from amateur instruments and recording equipment to professional gear, rare antiques, and major symphony orchestras. Unlike standard homeowners or renters policies, Clarion's specialized policies provide comprehensive, tailor-made coverage with several unique benefits. So, for instance, there's all-risk coverage, and that covers virtually every type of damage, loss, or theft with very few exclusions. Then there's worldwide protection. The coverage applies globally wherever you and your instrument are. There's no maximum value limit. They insure everything from a $2,500 student instrument to multi-million-dollar rarities. In the event of a total loss, you collect the predetermined insured amount, eliminating the need to negotiate replacement costs. That's called the valued at basis. Then the difference in value, that covers the difference in your instrument's value before and after a loss or a major repair. Then there's the right to repurchase. If your stolen instrument is found, you have the option to repurchase it for the exact amount you were paid in the claim settlement. Clarion works with a wide variety of clients within the music community, including students, individual amateurs, and professional musicians, collectors, trusts, museums, symphony orchestras, and recording studios, musical instrument makers, dealers, and repair shops. You can explore their policy details or get a customized quote directly through Jack Schoenfeld at clarionins.com. That's CLARIONINS.com. Thank you, Jack Schoenfeld, for being in Porterflute Pod, and thank you, Alan J. Tomasetti, for bringing us those questions and being our co-producer for the pod. Stay tuned for season 9. It's wonderful that you're here for a memoriam for Michel DeBost, as well as the exit interviews from my Blue Flute studio. Thanks for being in Porterflute Pod. I'm so grateful for you.